Hello and welcome to a brand new series of videos I'm going to be doing recapping my Pokemon Nuzlocke runs. I'm going to be streaming a fair few Nuzlocke challenges over on my Twitch stream, and I thought I'd summarize them and tell their stories over here on YouTube as well. I'm not sure if scripted content like this or just a collection of highlights would be best, or maybe some combination of the two, so please let me know in the comments which you'd prefer. On to the rules. For the uninitiated, a Nuzlocke challenge run of Pokemon has 4 basic rules. 1. You can only catch the first Pokemon you encounter on each route. If you run into a duplicate, you can choose to capture the next Pokemon instead. 2. Any Pokemon that is knocked out is considered dead and has to be either released or permanently boxed. Personally, I like to just sort of have a box that acts as a graveyard box, just so that we can go back and pay respect to the fallen comrades as the run goes on. Rule number 3, you must nickname your Pokemon to foster a bond and more of a relationship, more connection. And finally, rule number 4, if you white out, lose a battle, you've been defeated and the run is over, regardless of whether or not you still have Pokemon sitting alive in your box. Many players choose to add on additional rules to increase the challenge. I'll be making my runs a little bit more and more difficult as time goes on, but for this one, the only extra rules I'm adding are that I have to play in set mode. I never play in Switch anyway, I think it's kind of boring and lame. And also, legendaries are banned. I decided on the fly that using the Master Ball seemed cheap as well, so I won't be using that in this run. Especially in Gen 1, it's way too easy to just sort of rappel your way through the entire Power Plant and Master Ball Zapdos for an easy Elite Four sweep if things get rough, which is actually an endgame that I had used in a Pokemon Red Nuzlocke way back, a long time ago. But I decided that, in this case, since it's more of a challenge, I'd rather not use legendaries. Now, given that this is Pokemon Yellow, Brock poses a pretty big threat. With Pikachu, who we named Torek as our starter, our best bet lies on Route 22, west of Viridian City. There's a 10% chance each that we run into a Rattata or a Spearow, which would be awful, but there's an 80% chance that we either run into Nidoran male, Nidoran female, or Mankey, all of which get either low kick or double kick as an answer to the Brock threat. Fortune smiled upon us and we befriended Suede, the Nidoran male. We also picked up a Pidgey named Tomaltach, but I realized a little bit later that Pidgey is goddamn awful and gets no decent moves in Gen 1. Viridian Forest saw us add Madilz the Caterpie soon-to-be Butterfree to our squad. Butterfree falls off pretty quick in early gens, but for the earlier stages of the game it's fantastic, especially as a backup should some horrible fate befall Suede. With Suede hitting level 12 and learning Double Kick, it was time for Brock. A lot of the gyms in Yellow are at significantly higher levels than in Red and Blue, but Brock is actually a little bit lower to help balance the whole Pikachu versus Rock types issue, which is great for us. I opened Madilz the Still Caterpie to get some Switch XP as Suede came in. The 2 double kicks that he used were just enough to take out Geodude pretty easily. Onyx was a different story, as he immediately got a critical bind. The way multi-hit moves, including Wrap and Bind, work in Gen 1 is that if the first hit crits, all of the subsequent hits crit as well. So that was really annoying. Luckily, I was able to potion up after the bind ended and leer my way through the follow-up Bide. Onyx managed to crit me with bind again against all odds and hit me 5 times this time, forcing another potion out of me. Eventually, though, I was able to double kick the annoying Rock Snake down. Despite spending a fair amount of time grinding up Suede for double kick, I hadn't really spent much time on the rest of the team at this point. Partially because I didn't really have any interest in them long-term beyond Suede, but that made Route 3 really annoying, which is a phrase that I never thought I'd say. I decided to keep switch training Madilz, but by switching into Torek the Pikachu instead, getting them both some XP. In the very first fight, Torek got switched into a Sand Attack from a Pidgey, missed Thundershock 4 consecutive times, and then got crit by a Gust. Torek was dead. I should have played around the Crick, but honestly, Torek wasn't really long for our team anyway. In Yellow, you can't evolve your starting Pikachu, so it basically becomes worthless after Misty. That could cause problems for Misty herself, though. In the meantime, I almost lost Madilz to a Weedle of all things, because I missed the memo that Poison and Bug types are mutually super effective in Gen 1, but we got out of that situation with Suede. We managed to catch Keith the Spearow at the end of the route, as well as Grant the Zubat upon entering Mount Moon, but an issue that was arising was the massive level gap in our party. Suede was being forced to carry everybody on his back, and the level disparity showed it. By the end of Mount Moon, I grabbed the Dome Fossil, just in case I wanted Kabutops later. Personally, I prefer Kabutops because it's faster than Omastar, but we didn't end up using Kabutops in the end, so it doesn't really matter. Medills hit level 13 just before the Jesse and James fight at the end of Mount Moon and slapped down their Ekans and 2 Confusions. In the interest of safety, I switched an already injured Suede into the Meowth. This proved to be an extremely risky play, as Suede ate a critical bite, hitting him down to just 7 HP. After confirming that the Meowth did not have Quick Attack though, Suede was able to easily dispatch it with a double kick. We switched Medills back in to dominate the Coughing with 2 more Confusions. Without a way to hit Misty super effectively, I figured we should probably head north first. In trying to close the level gap, I led Medills against our rival Astreon. Medills was level 14, his lead was a level 18 Spearow. Not exactly doable, and definitely a higher level than I was anticipating. Suede had to come in and slap down the team, horn attacking the Spearow, water gunning the Sandshrew, double kicking the Rattata, and double kicking the Eevee. Are you beginning to understand how this level disparity happened? We cleared out all the trainers to the north and picked up Charmander, named him Tail, before running into any of the grass encounters, adding some much needed type coverage. After identifying pretty early that Suede was going to be our carry through Misty, I made the decision to hold off on evolving Nidorino until after the gym battle. No point in adding a ground typing to my ace when we're fighting the water gym. Fun fact, Misty's Starmie doesn't actually have any psychic type moves that attack you in Pokémon Yellow, so this allowed us to have a pretty fair type matchup for the gym battle. Horn Attack made quick work of Staryu two-shotting it. Starmie crit Suede on the first turn, but luckily it was only using Tackle. I opted for a safety heal, but Bubble Beam did about 35%. Starmie has very high base speed, and Gen 1 critical hits are based on the base speed, so I decided that the best course of action was to spam potions until an opening presented itself to us, where I wasn't in range for a critical Bubble Beam to kill Suede. Pretty soon, Starmie went for Harden and followed it up with a Tackle Miss and then an X defense. Despite the +2 defense boost, Suede was able to crit 2 consecutive horn attacks to slap that starfish down. I figured he'd earned that sweet, sweet Moonstone, and he turned into a Nidoking. Between Misty and Lieutenant Surge, I decided to put a heavy focus on closing the level gap and grinding up the other teammates, especially the fantastic Drowsy, named Emontizzle, that we picked up on Route 11. Hypno has 115 base special in Gen 1, which is almost as strong as the notoriously busted Kadabra. Emontizzle was immediately slated to be one of our all-stars for the run, and arguably our late-game ace. Even as a Drowsy, it already has 90 base special, which is pretty insane for the early game. By the end of the SSN, we gained some levels on most of our team, but Suede was still king. Level 26 at that point of the game is pretty absurdly overleveled, so when Astreon ambushed us at the end of the ship, Suede bopped his Spearow with a single horn attack, bopped his Rattata with a single horn attack, bopped his Sandshrew with a single Bubble Beam, and bopped his Eevee with a single double kick. So essentially, Astreon is a terrible trainer and should feel bad. Lieutenant Surge was pretty much the same story, with Suede not taking a single hit before Raichu's lifeless corpse hit the floor. Suede is merciless. Bit of a tangent here. I was really looking forward to using Stab Dig with Suede, because in Gen 1, Dig has the same base power as Earthquake. Unfortunately, for some random weird reason, Suede can't learn Dig, so I guess Nidoking just isn't gonna get a stab move until Silphco. That's a little bit annoying. Before leaving Vermilion, I acquired Oscar the Squirtle, getting me 2/3 of the way to the notorious Fire Water Grass Core. As the run continued, we ran into a trainer battle on Route 9. Talon was able to burn this level 24 Sandshrew with Ember, so I switched in Zack the Rattata to get some Switch XP going. But this rude-ass Sandshrew critical hit him with Slash, and he went down in a single hit. In modern-day Pokemon, critical hits do not ignore the damage reduction from Burn, so I thought we were perfectly safe. Apparently in Gen 1, Burns do not lower the damage of critical hits. Sorry, Zack, I probably should have studied up better. He was replaced by Kraken the Magnemite not too long later. I decided Magnemite was going to be part of our late game team purely because of its awesome stats, especially its special. But he was going to be more of a peripheral figure due to Magneton's complete and utter lack of any semblance of type coverage. I even decided that we'd pick a Mimic for it, just so that it could at least potentially copy some coverage moves. Rock Tunnel was uneventful, and suddenly Astreon decided that he wanted to get his ass handed to him again in Lavender Town. I felt bad for the kid and decided not to use Suede this time, opening with Kraken instead. Thunderbolt barely didn't take out the Fearow, but a second hit took it down. Tail took over against the Magnemite, digging for a one-hit. Shelter took some pummeling, but eventually went down, as did Sandshrew. After a few too many sand attacks from Eevee though, I decided that it was time to remind Astrion that Suede did in fact exist, and Suede put Astrion's Eevee back into the emergency room. By this point, I'd managed to close the level gap, but now it was time for chores. First, I went to Saffron to pick up Mimic. Except, just kidding, for some reason Team Rocket feels like it's much more important to guard this random family's house than it is to guard the dojo or the mart or the Pokemon Center. I tried to catch an Abra on Route 12, but forgot that the only thing it knows is teleport, and didn't even get a chance to throw a single ball. So I guess you could say I was on a roll, and all of these chores are going fantastically. On my way to pick up Fly, we caught Molodude the Doduo. Dodrio is far and away the best normal flying type in Gen 1, and it's a fantastic glass cannon, so he's great to have. Erica time. I decided Tail could take the XP for it, but it took forever to knock out the beefy boy that is Tangela. One Razor Leaf crit from her Weepin' Bell later, and I decided that maybe Molodude was the way to go. I changed my mind about 5 seconds later as Molodude ate 60% damage from a single hit upon switching in. Fine, I'll use Suede, who was hit to just 3 HP above half with a single Razor Leaf crit himself. Horn Attack managed to finish off the Weepin' Bell after a Stun Spore miss, but Gloom's Petal Dance took Suede all the way down to 17 HP. With Gloom locked into Petal Dance though, I decided to switch back to Tail, who resists it. But his underleveled ass was still taking a pretty fair amount of damage. 2 turns later, I finally remembered that Drowsy has Insane Special and could probably just slay this Gloom. 1 confusion later, and the badge was ours. I honestly did not expect Erica to be so tough, especially given our type advantages against her. We were lucky to make it out without any casualties. If you're wondering why Emontizzle was still a Drowsy, I decided that it was worth it to keep Drowsy as his base form for just a few more levels to enable us to learn Psychic a whole heck of a lot earlier. Drowsy's special is good enough that you don't really need the Power Spike from the Hypno evolution right away, and that Power Spike itself would pale in comparison to the Power Spike that we would get from obtaining Psychic. On that note though, this is where I also started to realize that Charmeleon, and by extension Charizard, really isn't what you would call a good Pokemon in Gen 1. Ember has already fallen off in a big way by this point, and our next fire move wasn't going to be until level 42. And that was only if I delayed evolving Charizard. I decided that after Erica that we definitely have to replace Tail as soon as something better came along. Rocket Hideout came and went without much of a hitch. Emontizzle cleared out the majority of the poison-type enemies with ease, while Oscar, now a level 25 Wartortle, opened against Giovanni to remove the Onix and the Rhyhorn from this plane of existence. In the interest of safety, I brought Suede in to double-kick the Persian down. Giovanni responded with his ultimate secret weapon, a guard spec. So Persian died painfully. Heading back to Lavender Town, I decided to try for a 5% Cubone encounter. Haunter is a great Pokemon stats-wise, but it doesn't really get that many moves in Gen 1, so I thought that a solid ground type would supplement my existing team a little bit more. I rappelled to the top floor where Cubone can be found, and prayed. It didn't work, so Mark the Ghastly joined the squad instead. I considered adding him to the main team, but decided nah, box life for him. I still didn't really have a replacement I was happy with for Tail, so I decided to get the best Pokemon that Gen 1 has to offer. I flew back to Vermilion for the Old Rod, and I fished up a Magikarp. Gyarados has 60 base special attack, so while it gets a ton of coverage moves, they're all special, so they're not very good. But that's because today is 2020. In this time capsule of 1998, special attack doesn't exist yet. There's only special. Gyarados has a base special stat of 100, almost as high as its attack, and almost as high as Charizard's best stat. Gyarados can dish out an insane amount of damage with moves like Surf, Blizzard, Thunder, and even Fire Blast. Anything you need done, Gyarados can do it for you. I think it actually might get the most coverage of any Gen 1 Pokemon except for Mew. We named ours Retrotato. I tried to pick up a Snorlax to make our already absurdly strong squad even stronger, but the wild Snorlax almost one-hit Emontizzle without a crit, so I figured that it wasn't worth the risk. Unfortunately, on our way to put Tail in the box, he ran into an oncoming self-destruct from an Electrode and died. I guess he thought that death was preferable to permanent imprisonment. This part of the game is a little bit challenging to strategize for in Yellow, due to the massive level spike. In Red and Blue, Koga and Sabrina's Pokemon are in the late 30s and early 40s. Sabrina's notorious Alakazam, for example, is level 43. In Pokemon Yellow, it's level 50, as is Koga's Venomoth. Sabrina's team in Yellow is at a higher level than it is in the Gen 2 post-game. So I took this opportunity in a couple of hours to clear out both the right side of Fuchsia, as well as the Cycling Road and the majority of the trainers in Silphco. In the meantime, we picked up Truthless the Hitmonchan, who actually has pretty decent special for the elemental punches in Gen 1. Finally, it came time to battle our rival Astrion at the end of Silphco. Retro Tato, now a level 31 Gyarados, opened to take on Astrion's Sandslash. Unfortunately, it turns out that I don't have quite enough brain wrinkles and not only forgot to heal Retro, but I also left him asleep. Truthless came out to tank a couple of hits while I fixed Retro Tato. Switching back into Retro, he almost took down the Sandslash in a single Surf, but finished it off with a tackle after only taking 6 damage. I switched Kraken in to slap down the Cloyster, but he did eat a critical Aurora Beam on switch-in, dealing just over 50% of his HP. Opposing trainers don't benefit from EVs, or as they would be called in Gen 1, Stat EXP, in this game, so I was confident that Magneton would outspeed the following turn, despite being one level lower and having the same base speed. Kraken slapped the Cloyster with a single Thunderbolt. I'd picked up the Earthquake TM in Silphco, so after a quick switch to Suede, Astrion's Magneton went down to a single Earthquake. With Kadabra out, I switched to Emontizzle the Hypno, who I had conveniently also forgotten to heal. Regardless, with his resistance to Psybeam, he was not in crit range, so it was a safe enough switch. One Super Potion and a couple of Tri-Attacks later, and Kadabra was down. Flareon, it turns out, is a garbage Pokemon that should feel garbage about itself, so Emontizzle was able to finish it off with ease. The subsequent Jesse and James fight was a sweep with just 3 Emontizzle Psychics. Retro Tato led against Giovanni and was able to slap down the Nidorino with 2 Surfs, but not before contracting Poison off of a Poison Sting. Retro almost took out the following Persian with a crit, but was crit by Payday himself, so I switched to Suede, finishing the Persian with a Strength. Suede was down to 44 HP, but Rhydon went down to a single Surf. I mashed through the Nidoqueen turn just a little bit too quickly, using Surf instead of Earthquake, but I got lucky and Nidoqueen only hit Suede with a scratch. Earthquake finished off Nidoqueen and Giovanni's team. At this point, I had a solid plan for each of the next 3 gyms. All of Sabrina's attacking moves are Psychic type, so I figured Hypno's Solid typing, Solid Special, and access to the physical Tri-Attack would be able to get us through her easily enough. Blaine barely fights back due to some weird issues with his AI, so Gyarados could deal with him easily enough. For Koga, I decided that Dodrio was the way to go, since his entire team in Yellow version is the Bug type. Sabrina first. I conveniently forgot that Abra could be annoying in the slightest, and ended up having to play around Flash accuracy drops. I didn't want to leave Emon out, so I switched in Retro to finish out the Abra. Keep in mind that Retro was 18 levels below the incoming Kadabra because I hadn't been planning to use him on this fight. Emontizzle himself was 12 full levels below the Alakazam, which was definitely a mistake and an oversight on my side. I had started to get cocky around here. Retro finished off the Abra despite a massive number of misses. I brought Emontizzle back in against the Kadabra, who immediately used Kinesis, lowering my accuracy again. We missed a couple of attacks while Kadabra hit Emon down to 72 HP with Psywave. With only a 5% chance of us going down to Psywave, since it does a random amount of damage between 1 and 75 in this fight, I decided against healing Emontizzle, which barely worked out as we lived with just 2 HP from the follow-up High Roll Psywave. Tri-Attack did knock Kadabra down to about half, but while we dropped a Hyper Potion, Sabrina dropped an X-Defend, so Kadabra would take significantly less from the next Tri-Attack. Then she used Recover. Yikes. Several Tri-Attacks and another High Roll Psywave later, and Kadabra was down to just a sliver of HP. Given that it outspeeds us though, and since Emon was at just 59 HP, I decided that fate was tempting me and went for the heal rather than finishing Kadabra off. Kadabra luckily didn't heal, but Emontizzle missed a Psychic and took a special drop from Kadabra's follow-up Psychic. One more Tri-Attack finished Kadabra off finally, but with the special drop, Emontizzle had no chance against the Alakazam. I had to switch and I had to reset my stats. Truthless was never intended to be a long-time member of the team, so we threw him to the wolves. Sabrina X-defended her Alakazam, but then brutally murdered Truthless with a Psychic, as Emontizzle came back in. It was at this moment that I noticed that I only had 3 Tri-Attacks left and that Alakazam has Recover. I did have 2 Max Ethers, but I was planning on saving them for the Elite Four ideally. Reflect went up on her side, and the first Tri-Attack barely cracked 10% damage. I relented and restored Tri-Attack's PP, but Alakazam hit Emon with another special drop off of Psychic. Kraken was part of the team purely because of Magneton's special, so I thought maybe he could get lucky and live a hit while I healed up. Alakazam used Recover twice, so I had hope of getting a Thunder Wave off after the heals, but on the fateful turn, Alakazam went for Psychic, taking Kraken down. Rip my Magnety boy. Emon was back in for another round. It was at this point, after being settled into this plan for over an hour, that chat informed me that Tri-Attack does not actually have a chance of inflicting status in Gen 1. Huh. So I decided that Sleep Spam was probably going to be our best bet now, and I dropped a Hypnosis. I considered YOLOing a switch to another Mon with higher attack in an attempt to beat Alakazam into submission before it woke up, but I decided against it. A crit Tri-Attack did about 50%, and when Alakazam woke up, it didn't recover. A second Hypnosis put it back to sleep, and finally, Emontizzle was able to take down the dreaded Alakazam. That fight was much harder than I anticipated. I'd forgotten that Psywave was a thing, and I didn't consider X-Defense as an option for her. Losing Hitmonchan really didn't matter, but losing Magneton was a little sad. Probably the least important of our core team, though. After being taught a lesson for my cocky ways, I didn't want to repeat on Koga. The plan remained Dodrio, and because opposing trainers don't get EVs, it was easy to figure out what the Venomoth's maximum speed could be. I decided that I was going to make sure that Molodude would outspeed a 15 DV speed Venomoth, the equivalent of a 31 IV speed in any modern Pokemon game, by 1, and I got to leveling. By that, I mean I leveled up my Dodrio 1 time and then dropped all 7 of my rare candies because I'm lazy. My speed was very, very close at that point, so I stopped by Celadon's supermarket and I invested some of my substantial fortune into 4 Carbos, getting Dodrio just enough speed to guarantee the outspeed on the Venomoth. Molodude stepped into Koga's arena and stared him down as the first Venonat took the field. Drill Peck, KO. Second Venonat, Drill Peck, KO. Third Venonat, Drill Peck, KO. And there it was, the Venomoth. I'd prepped for the speed and it was time to see if my math had worked. Hell yeah! Math! Math, bitch! Math, motherfucker! Didn't even need the crit! Get mathed on, game! Molodude's a god! After the smooth sailing that was Koga, I knew that I'd learned my lesson, and I would never get cocky again. I still had 2 spots open on my team for the late game, and I decided that I wanted Arcanine. Growlithe spawns in the Pokemon Mansion alongside Grimer, Rattata, and Raticate. I'd already knocked Rattata off that list with Zac earlier, but I wanted to maximize my chances of getting a Growlithe, so I stopped by the power plant in an attempt to pick up a 15% Grimer encounter. Unfortunately, we only got a Voltorb. I also stopped by the grass on Route 21 to knock Raticate off that list. We named him Space Waste because his entire purpose was just to let me dupe claws any potential Raticates in the mansion. Finally, I was ready to go to the Pokemon Mansion, where we ran into a Grimer because of course we did. Oh well, on to Blaine. Retrotato was at level 40 at this point, which was still a far cry from Blaine's levels, but with the type advantage in Blaine's notoriously awful AI, I felt confident. 1 critical Surf took out the Ninetales and 2 Surfs took down the Rapidash. After 1 heal, 2 more Surfs dealt with the Arcanine. 7 badges down. Since we're talking about AI, let me explain how smart AI works in most Pokemon games. Past a certain point of the game, trainers will have smart AI, which causes them to choose super effective moves, or generally just moves that will do the most damage. Usually, smart AI also includes tactical decisions like using a priority move if your Pokemon is in a kill range for that move. Things like that. Gen 1 smart AI functions a bit differently, which I conveniently forgot. All it does is guarantee that the opposing trainer will use a super effective move if it can. Now the second thing to discuss is that the opponents also cheat, which I also forgot. Rather than you and your opponent choosing your move simultaneously, they will choose their move right before their Pokemon acts. So, in other words, they'll choose their move after you do your move if they're slower. This is why they'll switch out after you move sometimes, despite the fact that that doesn't make any sense. I wonder why I'm bringing this up. Couldn't possibly be relevant to the upcoming Giovanni fight, could it? Giovanni 3 is a pretty easy fight generally. Weak to water, I have a Gyarados, and I'm definitely not going to get cocky again after Koga and Blaine went easily. Fact is that I was wholly focused on the upcoming rival battle after Giovanni, and I wasn't really thinking about him at all, and thus I didn't really have much of a plan. Retro Tato opened against his Dugtrio and took it down with a single Surf. Persian's guaranteed crit slash hit him for almost exactly half, but a critical Surf took Persian to a sliver. I didn't want to risk the crit, so I switched to Suede, while Giovanni used a very useful and very helpful guard spec. Surf took down Persian with ease. Nidoqueen was next. Dang. The fact that this doesn't 2-hit KO concerns me a little bit. I don't know if this Nidoqueen has ground-type moves. I don't think the Nidoqueen does. It might, though. I don't think the Nidoqueen does. The Nidoking has Earthquake, I'm pretty sure. Oh! Well, live? Oh! Cool. Okay, well that's, Sorry, Suede! Emontizzel took a huge Earthquake, but finished the Nidoqueen with Psychic. This is where our AI conversation comes into relevance. Smart AI, as I'm used to it functioning, would cause Nidoking to use Earthquake on Hypno, as it does the highest amount of damage and can't miss, unlike Thunder. So I went for a pivot into Dodrio, who is immune to Earthquake. But I forgot that the AI cheats and chooses their move after yours, so Smart AI dictated that Nidoking used Thunder, since it knew I was going to switch. What the fuck? Why would you do that? That makes no sense! I wasn't happy. I sacrificed Grimer to heal Emontizzel up, who was promptly able to eliminate Nidoking. Rhydon, Giovanni's ace, knew Rock Slide, so I didn't feel comfortable switching into Retro Tato and healed Emontizzel instead. Rock Slide hit, and did an insane 105 damage without a critical hit. I knew I was dead to a crit even if I healed, so I went for a Hypnosis, and Emontizzel missed, dying to the follow-up Earthquake. Thankfully, Retro Tato was able to finish off Rhydon with a Surf, saving the run. Suede, who had carried us through the first half of the game, Emontizzel, who had been our based god of a psychic type, and Molodude, our drill pecky Koga Slayer, were no more. Our hopes lay solely on Retro Tato's shoulders. Or did they? I sat back for a few minutes and formulated a plan. A new team, captained by our one and only Water Sneck. Oscar the Wartortle was still in the PC. Blastoise is a perfectly passable Pokemon, so he rejoined the squad. Mark the Ghastly could become a Haunter, and while coverage was sparse in Gen 1, Hypnosis, Dream Eater, and Confuse Ray could definitely do a job. Space Waste, the now ironically named Raticate, joined the squad, and Keith the Fearow joined as well. Finally, I'd never actually acquired a Pokemon in Celadon, so I picked up the gift Eevee for a Jolteon named Krytoth. It was time to get to work. The Pokemon Mansion was the best place to grind at this point. My target level wasn't insanely high immediately, since all I wanted to do was get past our rival and have access to Victory Road for better switch training, as well as Route 23 for another catch. I slapped Time 6 speed on and started genociding Grimer and Rattata. After a couple of hours, I was ready for the next rival fight. But first, I picked up some various TMs that I required. The general moveset plan was as follows. Gyarados would know Surf, Blizzard, Hyper Beam, and Strength. Blastoise would have Surf and Strength. I wanted to give it Ice Beam, but I had already used that TM on Nidoking. Haunter would have access to Confuse Ray, Hypnosis, Nightshade, and Dream Eater. Fearow would basically just use Drill Peck. Jolteon would have access to Pin Missile to deal with our rivals Alakazam and Exeggutor, Quick Attack for some priority coverage, Thunder Wave, and finally Thunder, which would require me to grind all the way to level 52 without a particularly good damaging move. Raticate honestly didn't end up getting much training at all, and we just kind of decided that it would be best for my sanity to just use it as a sacrifice should that be necessary. Additionally, I wanted Jolteon to outspeed the champions Alakazam and Gyarados to outspeed Lance's Dragonite, which would take some additional stat XP training. But before all of that, we fought Astreon on our way to the Pokemon League. None of our new recruits were ready, so Retro was going to have to sweep by himself. And he started strong with a Surf, taking out the Sandslash lead. Execute went down to a single Blizzard, Cloyster went down to 2 Surfs due to its abysmal special, and at this point, the Magneton still only knows Thundershock rather than Thunderbolt, so I felt safe keeping Retrotato in. Surf did a lot of damage, but Retro took a Thunder Wave, so I opted to switch in Crytoth, who was safe despite the level disparity due to Magneton's atrocious moveset. Except just kidding, Bulbapedia is apparently wrong about the rival's moveset here, and it knows Swift rather than Sonic Boom, which scared me really badly. A crit Swift would have taken down Crytoth, but I needed to get Retro's paralysis off, so I had to take the risk. Magneton went for Supersonic though, and I was able to switch back into Retrotato, who promptly ate another Thunder Wave. Frustrated, I just decided to surf the damn thing. Thundershock did big damage to Retrotato, but Magneton was down. I dropped the one full restore that I'd picked up at the mansion, and a critical Surf was enough to take down Kadabra. Flareon was unable to stand up to the power of Retro's Surf, and Astreon was down, with minimal problems. As we finally reached Route 23, I ran into a level 45 Fearow, and I decided to use it to replace Keith, purely because it was 25 levels higher, and I'd already done so much grinding that the idea of not having to grind for those extra 25 levels was much more beautiful than having an access to another Pokemon. We named him Echo. I cleared out Victory Road, but after seeing how often I had to go heal trying to grind because of damn Geodudes and Gravelers exploding on me, I figured that the mansion was in fact the superior grinding area. So back we went for 2 more hours. At the end of the grind, our levels were not insane, but they were what I decided would probably be enough. Mark the Haunter hit level 44, and with stat XP was able to outspeed everything on Agatha's team except for the final Gengar. Oscar was level 47. Crytoth was level 53, Retrotato was level 59, Echo was level 45, and Space Waste was still at level 30. But it was finally time. Keeping in mind that Thunderbolt was off the table as I'd taught it to Magneton, Lorelei was going to be something of an accuracy lottery with Thunder. Crytoth slapped the opening Dugong with a single Thunder. Cloyster dropped to a single Thunder as well. Beefy Boy Slowbro was out next, and I figured it could probably tank, but no! A single Thunder, and it went down. Pin Missile is a very, very weak move, and it doesn't get the same type attack bonus, but it also did hit Jinx super effectively and was more accurate than Thunder. It took a while to knock out Jinx, but eventually Crytoth did. A 4th Thunder hit the Lapras into deep red health, while Hydro Pump knocked Crytoth down to just 1/3. Lapras was so low that I opted for Quick Attack to finish it off instead of risking the 30% miss chance on Thunder. And it didn't finish it off. For a brief second I panicked, but Lorelei opted to use a Super Potion of all things instead of attacking. In the interest of safety, I switched into Retrotato to finish off the Lapras. Bruno was next, but Retro was expected to make quick work of him. Surf took down Onix, Hyper Beam missed once but then took down Hitmonchan, Surf bopped Hitmonlee, and a 3rd Surf took down the 2nd Onix. A critical final Surf took out his Machamp. I opened Crytoth to try to get a little bit more XP against the Agatha, because as of right now, we were actually speed tied with the Alakazam. Her first Gengar isn't really much of a threat, so I thought it was a safe call. After missing the first 2 Thunders and getting paralyzed by a Lick, Crytoth finally landed a Thunder. After a substitute, Gengar was very, very low, and Crytoth just used Pin Missile until it went down. Agatha sent out Golbat next, but pivoted to Haunter as Crytoth was fully paralyzed. Knowing that Mark outsped this Haunter, and that it couldn't really hurt Mark without Hypnosis, which I could heal, I switched into Mark. Agatha switched back to Golbat, so I switched back to Crytoth. Finally, I was able to land a Thunder, and Golbat went down. Mark came back into Haunter, and took out Agatha's Haunter with just a couple of Dream Eaters. After confusing Arbok, I decided to switch back into Kratoth very briefly, just for that tiny bit of extra XP. After going back to Mark, he finally took down the Arbok with Dream Eater. Unfortunately, I forgot that the final Gengar knew Psychic, and Mark went down to a single hit. I went onto the mental autopilot for a minute and brought in Oscar because he knew Bite, which hits Gengar super effectively, right? Except I have 0 brain wrinkles, and Dark-type doesn't exist yet. Thankfully, I did realize this mistake immediately, facepalmed, and switched into Retrotato instead. A special drop from Psychic forced me to switch back into Oscar to reset Retro's special. Despite Confuse Ray memes, Retro did eventually hit 3 Surfs in a row and knocked out Agatha's ace. I healed up between the battles and prepared for Lance. Kratoth opened the fight to get a quick KO on Lance's Gyarados before our own Gyarados took center stage. Retro's Blizzard eliminated Dragonair, who did hit us with a Thunderbolt, but only for about 40%. Blizzard took out the second Dragonair and Surf eliminated the Aerodactyl. After seeing Thunderbolt do only 40%, I actually started to believe that maybe Retro could actually live a Thunder from this Dragonite. Blizzard is only 90% accurate, so in the interest of safety and that dream, I sent out Space Waste to allow me a free switch into Echo, both of whom died for the cause of getting Retrotato healed back to full. In the end, it didn't end up mattering as Blizzard hit, and down went the Dragonite. The champion. All of our trials and tribulations had led to this moment. The deaths of our friends and compatriots would not be in vain, as Swade looked down on us from the heavens above. I knew we had to make this work. Retrotato opened for me, quickly eliminating the Sand Slash with a single Surf. The plan was to use Jolteon to clear the rest of the team, but I didn't want to risk a special drop on Kratoth by switching in against the Alakazam. 1 Strength and a Hyper Beam later, and down was Big Zam. Well, I guess that speed training for Kratoth didn't really end up mattering after all. Exeggutor doesn't really know any moves, so I took this opportunity to switch into Kratoth, who eliminated Exeggutor with 2 doubly super effective pin missiles. Magneton wasn't a huge issue for Kratoth, but Kratoth couldn't really hit it very hard either. Eventually, after some back and forth and a couple of screeches, I switched to Oscar to reset the screeches. Oscar fell to a single Thunderbolt on the switch-in, but Kratoth was able to take down the Magneton. Cloyster fell to a single Thunder, and I switched in Retro just to give our run savior the final hit as Surf took out the Flareon, winning the challenge. I didn't really do any prep work for this run, and I'd forgotten how wild the level spikes are in Yellow. The later stages of the game ended up being a lot more challenging than I expected, especially after amassing what I perceived to be my dream team of Nidoking, Hypno, Dodrio, and Gyarados. In the end though, some cheeky strategizing got me past my mistakes and into the Hall of Fame. I'll be doing a Pokemon Silver Nuzlocke on my stream over the next little while, and this time, I'll be adding a couple of extra rules to make it a bit more challenging. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and dropping a like, and if you'd like to come hang out on the live stream, the link can be found in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.